Hey guys, Isabel here. Welcome back to Railed In. So hopefully I gave it enough time for everyone to sort of see the new Spider-Man No Way Home movie. It came out on Friday, or if your theater near you offered it, you could see a pre-showing on Thursday the 16th instead of Friday the 17th. Because that's when I saw it. I saw it on Thursday the 16th, and wow. That's all I have to say right now before I give you guys the warning that this video will contain spoilers, as it is my review for No Way Home. So if you have not seen it, go watch it. It deserves your time and your money, and you will not be disappointed. And although I do think it's a good movie, there is one section of it I did kind of have a little bit of a problem with, and that's the opening. Like the opening, first 5 minutes essentially. So basically it starts off with, we get the audio from the end credit scene, I think, of Far From Home, where Mysterio, or Quentin Beck, basically reveals who Peter Parker is. He reveals him as Spider-Man and saying that he's the one who killed him and basically caused all the destruction in London and all over Europe and everything, which creates a bunch of people to kind of turn on him, and he tries to swing away with MJ. But as he's swinging, he passes, I think, 2 advertisements for Rogers the Musical. Now, if you've been watching the Hawkeye series or even just saw the trailer for it, you know that Rogers the Musical is depicted in there, which gets me a little bit confused on the timeline that No Way Home is in, because Hawkeye, I think, has been confirmed to take place around 2 years after Endgame, and we know that No Way Home is directly after Far From Home, because it starts off right as where the end credit scene was. And I think Far From Home was about 6 months, maybe, I think up to a year after Endgame. So perhaps, and I do know that plays last, like Broadway plays, they do last and can last years. So I don't know if this is just an advertisement we see of it coming up, or if this is still going on. But I was just a little confused on that. It was cool that that Easter egg was in there. It's just it kind of messes up the timeline a little bit, I think, in my head. If you know that timeline question, feel free to leave it in the comments. And also, I do have to say, and this might show how nowadays everyone believes what the media tells them to, which if that is, that's a really good message, I think. But I'm actually very surprised that literally every single person, except for maybe 5 total, immediately turned on Peter Parker when Quentin Beck told them that he was the bad guy, basically. Which is kind of understandable, because Quentin, it was worldwide, it was known that Quentin Beck was the one who saved the whole world, basically. But still, didn't people not know that Tom Holland was almost part of the Avengers for a little bit? So I don't know, I just found it a little bit unrealistic that and maybe they just didn't decide to depict the people, the random strange people who still liked Peter Parker. But I was kind of is it really realistic for every single person to kind of immediately turn on him and try to grab him and everything like that? Because they did it right away. There was no hesitation. They were really? He did that? They were oh, he did that. And they tried to pull off his mask in public, and I was maybe if it was someone else besides MJ also trying to be give him a chance or something, then maybe a little bit. But it did show later on that it was divided, people who supported Spider-Man and people who didn't. But I just think maybe show that support right when it happened as well, because it was 100% everyone just mobbed on him. And it's not too big a thing, it's just something that was kind of wow, everyone hates him right now. And again, with the first 5 minutes, I was happy. I think, well, actually, I don't think we have much info on what Happy is doing after Stark's death, because he worked for Stark, and I'm assuming that after Stark's death, he's kind of one of the top guys. So if something happens immediately, and I'm sure he knows that Tony probably told him to keep an eye on Peter at some point. So how does he not know immediately that this piece of information that has been all over the news is happening? Because he only finds out when they're watching on TV. He doesn't have no alert comes to his phone. I just find that a little odd. I feel he should have gotten a notification and be Peter, what's going on? But again, those aren't like two big deals, just something that I kind of noticed and I was like, maybe I feel like that's not exactly in character, but those are just my personal opinions. If you guys might have different ones, and that's okay. I liked how they brought back J. Jonah Jameson, though, from the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. And of course, he originally does not like Spider-Man in that one, and he does not like Spider-Man in this one, which I think is really funny, and I'm glad they included him, even though I don't think they're the same J. Jonah Jamesons. I think that was like revealed, but I just think it's fun that they put him in there. I like that a lot. Okay, and just remembered, No Way Home is 1 week from Far From Home, but that still puts the timeline, relatively 6 months to a year after Endgame. So, and I know there were so many theories going around about this movie years before it came out, but I know one of them was right, that you guys probably saw and thought of, was that Daredevil Murdoch was gonna be in it as Peter's lawyer, and he was. He got a cameo, which means that Daredevil is now in the MCU, which I know a lot of people were happy about. I can't remember if like the show was threatening to be canceled or something was going on with the show, and fans weren't happy about that because they liked the show a lot. But he's in the MCU now, so we will probably, hopefully, maybe be seeing a whole lot more of him. Although I feel like the trailers definitely put a lot of scenes that they cut out from the movie, because I feel like Daredevil Murdoch was supposed to like also go to like the police station with Peter Parker, but that didn't show up in the actual movie. Also, another thing I noticed character-wise, going back to Happy, like this also kind of has to go with like the fact like he didn't get alerted that Peter Parker's identity had been revealed, is that I feel like they kind of made Happy's character a bit more like goofy and like not serious and like a little bit more like dumb than he was in the previous films we've seen him in, which like I don't like. I feel like he was just very like discombobulated in this movie, and I feel like in other, like he's always been kind of goofy a little bit, but like I feel like in other movies he's had his eye on the ball, I feel like. So that's like, again, and this is all within like the first like 5-10 minutes. So that was just like the opening of the movie, I think, is where I'd have like my most critiques about, but everything else is kind of like for the most part pretty good, I believe. And again, these aren't like deal breakers for me with the movie, which is something I kind of noticed, and if I had to like really nitpick at it, those are what I would say. And later we get a scene where Peter is listening to the radio, and we get a little bit of information on the new and improved Statue of Liberty, which I also believe was mentioned in the Hawkeye series, and that we are going to see later in this movie. And I think also when I get to the end, sort of the review has symbolism for the movie as a whole. But basically it's that they're putting Captain America's shield on Lady Liberty. I just want to say, going back to the people who like half don't like and half do like Peter Parker, props to the school for like going through all that added extra security to like get him back in the school safely, which like, and this could be a reach, but it kind of reminds me of not too long ago, but back in the day when segregation was a thing. And I watched a movie on it when I was really younger, and I think her name was Ruby, but basically she was a black little girl, and she was going to a whole complete white school, and there was this big protest going on in front of the school as Ruby was like led into the classroom. And so that's just kind of what it reminded me of. Again, not sure if that's a reach or just a coincidence, but I thought it was interesting that that's kind of what it portrayed a little bit. And something I did like a lot, which kind of adds to, the group forming outside of the school, is that it really, I think, showed an interesting angle of what it can be like to be famous. Because us, who, we see all these actors and actresses and musicians, and we think it's, must be so cool to be famous. Like, I'd love to meet them one day, or like that's, everyone's eyes are all on you. But sometimes that's like not cool at all. Like when Peter's walking through the school hallways, and literally it's like a moment of silence, and then everyone's phone's out, and you can hear all the clicks, and it's like very stressful, and it's very cringe, and it's uncomfortable. So I think the movie depicted that really well, and I'm glad that they put that in there. Also, just something I thought was really funny, because I'm in my master's program at college, so I've gone through the whole college admission thing. But it's like, I remember it's like you never know which one is which until you open it. But in reality, the difference between acceptance letters and decline letters are usually that rectangular envelope that we see in the movie, but acceptance letters are this huge like packet that you get. So like if you get a little letter, you're pretty much already declined. Like you kind of already know, which I know is not like, that's not a critique or anything at all. It's just I thought was funny. But also, and like this was a good superhero movie, but I liked how it had real world issues. So like the famous thing I just talked about, and then how, you know, schools do have a prejudice. They do and they can have a prejudice on who does and does not get in by what kind of happens around you. So when they thought Peter Parker was a bad guy, they did not let him get into any of the schools, and that prejudice was also towards Ned and MJ, just because they were very close to Peter Parker. But then when Peter Parker does something good and saves the school admission lady, she was like, oh yeah, you and your friends of course can get in. Which I guess can also lead to like, if you're famous or have a lot of money, you can almost get into any school you want to. So, you know, there's both different prejudices that were depicted in this, which I liked that they did that. It sucks for Peter Parker, and I was like really mad that I was like, just like, and because we know, you know, he's good, but just like, I like that they put that in there. But so Peter, thinking he failed his friends, gets an idea to go to Doctor Strange and ask him to do a spell. And something that I was super surprised about is that in this moment, Doctor Strange is actually not the Sorcerer Supreme. I think many others have been referring to him as such, but that title actually goes to Wong, which I was like my mind was like, I was so surprised. I 110% thought that that title would go to Doctor Strange, but I'm actually kind of happy it didn't. And just because like I feel like he's like kind of like, he's like a very new member, and yes, he's very powerful, and I'm sure will soon, maybe in Multiverse of Madness or maybe a little bit later, will get the title of Sorcerer Supreme. But right now I'm actually glad it went to Wong, because I feel like Strange can still be a little bit reckless at times. But we do get to see Wong again, and he is trying to open a portal to go somewhere. And we did see him in Shang-Chi. He says he has higher priorities to attend to, being the Sorcerer Supreme. And I wonder if that was when we saw him with Abomination, if that was one of his higher priorities, because he was training, or it looked like he was training Abomination in Shang-Chi. So, very interested to see where that storyline will go in the future. And this is another trailer change where I think Wong is like under no circumstances do that spell. And in the actual movie, he just kind of shrugs his shoulders, and he's like, well, just prepare for the consequences, essentially. So, which I feel like they probably did on purpose, because we all know Tom Holland is not the best at keeping secrets, although he did do a good job in this, not spoiling anything for this movie. But I also think it probably was to mislead us a little bit, because I personally feel that nowadays, and sometimes especially with Marvel, they reveal a lot of things in the trailers, which kind of leaves us with nothing to be surprised about in the movie. So I kind of like that they did that, a little bit of like diversion. So I was okay with it. And of course, I know they always take like, you know, different shots. There's always different endings to things. So it's just whichever one they think fits the movie the best. And before I saw the ending of the movie, I actually thought Doctor Strange was going to take up sort of like a mentor role with Peter Parker, because it was sort of Tony Stark early on, but Tony died. Sorry, Tony stands. But I feel like there were a lot of moments in the movie where you can kind of see that it would be a very interesting and I think a beneficial dynamic. I think Peter Parker would actually humble Strange a little bit, and I think Strange would give Peter Parker a little bit more confidence in himself. Either way, I liked the dynamic. But then he performs the spell, and, you know, we get that trailer scene where it gets all messed up, basically, and what the trailer didn't show is that Strange was able to contain the spell, although it did work, and we get Doc Ock. He is the first villain to appear with his mechanical arms. Really awesome to see him tearing up the streets of New York. And to the MIT acceptance lady, why would you buckle your seatbelt when you're hanging over a bridge? Girl, come on. But then she totally like gave the shaking finger to Doc Ock, so redeemed. And then we get a glimpse of the Green Goblin. He throws his pumpkin bomb. But I thought we were going to have a bit more initial fight scene between Peter and the Green Goblin on the bridge, but, you know, Doc Ock kind of cleaned up a little bit. Which is fine because we get a lot of interaction with the Green Goblin later. And I like how the introduction of the movie, which is basically, I think, the first, 30 minutes, took its time. It took its time to introduce the villains and also to just build up the initial characters, like where they are in the arc for that movie. So it didn't feel rushed. I think the pacing was great. And then we're introduced to Lizard from Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movies, the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. Doc Ock and Goblin are from Tobey Maguire's franchise. And this movie had, I think, the most suit changes I've seen. Because we have, Peter, he gets some green stuff thrown at his suit, so I think he takes it apart. It kind of looked like it was like the base of like that suit, but it's basically like a black and gold wire kind of suit. And then we are introduced to Sandman and Electro, and I like how Sandman is initially helping Peter. That is something that I did not expect, but I'm glad that they put it in. Because I like how, usually in the past, a villain is a villain. They're bad because they're bad. But recently, and I think especially sort of, I think remastering is too big a word, but I'm going to use it anyways. Remastering the villains a little bit, they definitely added a lot more depth to them, which I really liked. And that's something that I've noticed in most of the Marvel movies, well, the newer Marvel movies, is that their villains or antagonists are very complex. And here you had 5, so. But it's not just a movie about Peter Parker trying to fend off 5 Spider-Man villains. We're going into their stories too a little bit, which I am glad we did. But Doctor Strange wants to send them back to their universes where they will ultimately die, and Peter Parker, finding this out, doesn't want that to happen. He wants to fix them before sending them back to their universes. And then there's this whole fight scene, sort of like an escape scene, where Peter tries to take the spell that Doctor Strange had contained in this box, basically. But briefly, Doctor Strange's cape actually is seen on Spider-Man, which brought me back to What If, the episode where Spider-Man actually acquires Doctor Strange's cape. I believe that is the zombie episode. But I think that could be an Easter egg, and I think that's really cool that they put it in there, and I hope we get a little bit more of that in the future. But really cool, connected What If, which is the animated Marvel series that recently came out, actually. And something that I think was definitely hinted at in the trailers, but I wasn't really expecting too much, was that briefly Doctor Strange and Peter Parker were kind of against each other. But that set up something else that I enjoyed in this movie, is that it really showed the characters of Peter, MJ, and Ned and exactly how smart they are. We definitely know Ned is smart, as he's the guy behind the chair in the past 2 movies. And even though they go to a very highly academic school, we kind of don't really get to see them use their knowledge, book smarts, a lot. But we do see that in this movie, and we see it being used to help them with strategies in battle. So I'm really glad we got to see that, because in my personal opinion, I don't think we saw it enough in the first 2 movies. So when Peter's using geometry to escape the mirror dimension, gold. And Peter just trapped Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension, was not expecting that, but also kind of hilarious. And shocking. For some reason, I feel like that act, fits, but also, doesn't fit Peter Parker's character. Because I can see how, Peter wants to get Doctor Strange safely out of the way so he can do his own thing, but also, he trapped him. But it's just my opinion, not too big of a thing anyways. Although something that, I like the thought of, trying to make these people better so so Peter can send them back to their universes so they don't die. But I don't really like the concept that the movie used, which is the term of fixing them. I don't really think people really should try to be or have to be fixed. So like that's like, I think maybe just like the terminology was off on that, but like it just kind of, it like made me cringe a little bit when he's like, I have to fix them. It's like, well, people aren't really like that's kind of weird a little bit, which I guess is like, you know, over the years we've been like, you're perfect as you are kind of thing. So maybe that's where it comes from. Like why I think it's so weird to like have to like fix someone. But I think maybe the terminology could have been a little bit better with that. And like in that sense though, I am a little bit like on Steven's side with sending them back to that universe, because in a way it's kind of like time travel. Like if you take someone out of a universe and they're bad and you somehow fix them and they're good, and then you put that good one back in that universe, it changes a lot of future events, which changes the main character of that universe. So let's say Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, you know, Tobey Maguire had to go through all of these trials and tribulations to become who he is. And if Doc Ock slash the Green Goblin are good, then what will Toby's Peter Parker, oh my god, become? So like I can see both points of view, but me personally, I would lean a little bit more towards Steven's idea of it. And what I noticed is that there was some creepy themes to this movie, which I thought were really cool. I know that Multiverse of Madness is supposed to be like Marvel's scary movie, and so I feel like we've slowly, because I've noticed like in the past couple of new Marvel content we've gotten, like there have been these moments of like creepiness. So I feel like we're sort of slowly building up, like they're slowly preparing us for the creepy factor in Doctor Strange's second movie. And violent Peter, especially in regards to him and the Green Goblin. That's a side I wasn't expecting to see, but I'm glad we did get to see, because I think it kind of shows the transition of, we've kind of thought, you know, the first two movies, Peter Parker is still a little bit of a kid, you know, he's in high school, but now I think we're seeing him sort of growing into an adult, and that means he's also growing into different emotions, and, you know, he has different mentalities on how to solve certain things, and he's frustrated and everything. So I just think it was a really, like, climax to his feelings, but also a good transition period of how he can grow from this. Even though you think being violent isn't really growth, but I think in order to learn how to not be violent, you kind of have to know what violence is in a way. Not to get too philosophical, but that's what I think. Also, Aunt May's death scene had me on a roller coaster, because I thought she died right on the impact, and then she was alive and walking and talking, and I was like, oh, she's fine. And then she fell, and then she's like, I'm fine. And then she died. I can't believe. They also they kind of gave like the Uncle Ben role a little bit to her, with like the whole like great power comes great responsibility quote, which I like that they put in there, because we haven't had that quote in the movies, in the Tom Holland movies yet. So I'm glad, and that's like the Spider-Man quote, you know? So I'm glad that they put that in there, especially as Aunt May is dying, because in Tobey's world, it's when Uncle Ben is dying. But again, I also, like, it was sad, but this is also to help Spider-Man grow up. But like, I was like absolutely heartbroken, and people are gonna, and like, and the whole time I was watching it, I was like, the SWAT team has arrived, they're gonna walk in, they're gonna think Peter killed his aunt, and I was stressing out. And then he had to, like, it was heartbreaking that he literally had to like run away from her, like to save himself, basically. Like, that was just, I'm getting like a little emotional just thinking about it. But then we get to the moment that I think all of the fans were waiting for, and that is when we get to see the multiverse and Tobey Maguire's Peter and Andrew Garfield's Peter. Well, technically Andrew Garfield's first, but the Spider-Mans, they all are together. And clever, because that's not how I expected them to enter into the MCU. But I think it's fitting. Like, they enter via confusion and kind of a hilarity moment after we've had that horrendous moment, an emotional moment with Aunt May's death. And I like how, you know, they kind of came at the right moment too, because I think they came at a moment where Tom Holland's Peter Parker was most vulnerable. He just lost his aunt. He's been having a really tough time with, you know, being the most hated person on the planet right now. And so, you know, them being older and having already gone through all of their experiences, being able to share it with him, I think really helped him kind of pull, like I'm pretty sure he was sitting in like a lot of darkness, but I think they helped pull him, at least for that moment, back into the light. Because I feel like we saw that, that burst of violence from him before Aunt May's death towards the Green Goblin, and then the Green Goblin basically killed Aunt May. So I feel like if he didn't have that support system, he would have definitely fallen into darkness, kind of like Tobey Maguire's. I can't remember which Spider-Man it is, but I think it's the third one of Maguire's franchise. So but worse. I feel like Tom Holland, dark Spider-Man, Peter Parker would be worse. And they explained, well, not really explained, but they talked about how Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker doesn't need the web shooters. He just sprays webs out of his wrist, which is funny because I know a lot of people in the past couple of months were kind of talking about that, and they're making jokes and memes about it. And so I'm glad that they put it in the movie. And also, can we talk about Ned's magic? This, for some reason, took me a while to notice. I kind of forgot that you had to know magic or something to use the ring, the portal ring, and to make a portal. And Ned started doing sparks, and I was like, so Ned's character, he's gonna hopefully have a new character arc in the new trilogy. I know that Sony and Marvel are collaborating on a new Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy, so maybe Ned will have powers or something, or he'll be more than just the guy in the chair, which is not a bad position, but I'm very interested to see where he's going to go. I know there might be an Easter egg or something that in Ned's house there is a weapon on the wall. It's a knife-ish thing, but it has two forked blades, and I think in the comics Elektra uses that weapon, and then but Elektra's a female, so you think your first thought would be the mom, but maybe a similar character or maybe a male version of the character will go to Ned. Just my thoughts, could be totally wrong, could be totally something different, but that's just what I thought I saw. And then we get to the 3 Spider-Man fight scenes. Although I do have to say, when I was first watching it, I wasn't really sure how I felt about seeing Captain America's shield on the Statue of Liberty. I know in that universe Captain America was the living symbol of America and freedom and liberty and everything like that. But in this universe where Captain America doesn't exist, I'm kind of that's almost defacing Lady Liberty. And I think it was also meant to kind of be that sort of symbolism, to put so much emphasis on heroes rather than yourself, your own will to help yourself prosper, kind of, which I'll talk about a little bit later when the shield eventually falls. But I liked how it's always kind of funny because Spider-Man kind of works alone, but now they all had to learn to work as a team, which I really enjoyed. I think that was a learning experience for all 3 of them. But what I liked a lot is that the Tom Holland Peter Parker, Peter 1, was the team leader. If you put those 3 Spider-Mans together and told people to say who's the leader Spider-Man, I feel like people would point to Tobey Maguire because 1, I think he's the oldest, and 2, his Spider-Man franchise was the first one. Or it's the first, besides the cartoons, of course, and the comics, but he was the first Spider-Man trilogy, I believe. There might have been one older than 1970s or something, but I'm glad it was Tom Holland's Peter Parker because I think, in the future, he led this team, perhaps that it's a foreshadowing for him leading another team, some other team. Don't know which team that will be, or just learning to be a leader. And can I just say, I feel I'm hesitant to use the term redeemed, but I was very happy with Doc Ock's character. How he kind of, I guess we're supposed to view him as kind of a troubled, not, I guess a troubled, but a tortured and a mentally tortured character. But seeing him help Spider-Man do good, because I know in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, I think they were pretty they weren't initially mad at each other or anything, or on bad terms before he got the arms attached to him. But it was just really nice to see him like help and be a significant help to like, saving the world again, basically, and saving some of the characters as well from dying. And Miles Morales was also mentioned. I think one of the Peters joked about how they wonder if there's a black Spider-Man out there. That's Miles Morales. Into the Spider-Verse, second movie coming out relatively soon, like next year or something. And Andrew's Peter Parker being the one to save MJ when he couldn't save Gwen. Oh my gosh. I was like, I almost burst into tears, and so did Andrew, that Peter Parker's, Peter too, I think. Oh, but I was so happy. I know a lot of people didn't like The Amazing Spider-Man, like they didn't like Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker Spider-Man. Oh, wow, that's confusing to say all those names. But I personally never had a problem with him. I liked the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but just to see him, in the eyes of, I think, the rest of the audience, be redeemed, very happy about that, so glad. And then if we didn't need future foreshadowing about Ned and his magical abilities, the cape, Doctor Strange's cape, saves Ned, because Ned actually got Doctor Strange out of the mirror dimension on accident, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So, but again, possibly a future hint that his character is going to evolve into maybe someone who deals in magic or some other superhero, possibly. And also I loved how we could see the extent to Doctor Strange's power, because we've seen it a lot throughout the MCU, but I feel like he's gotten more powerful. His ability to manipulate magic has become more intense. He basically like knit back together an entire universe, which I think is impressive. One quick critique on the whole fight scene. Sometimes in these like, big action superhero movies, they use something that I refer to as like shaky camera. So like if a punches land or someone's get like knocked to the ground, the camera will shake a little bit when that action happens. I personally find it very nauseating. I know Civil War had a lot of shaky cam in the first Lagos fight scene. So a little bit less of that personally is my own critique to that, just because it's a little bit distracting for me. But that's kind of all I had, and then that portion as like a critique on it. But briefly, before Doctor Strange knits everything back together and Tom Holland's Peter Parker makes what I think is like the ultimate sacrifice, we see the multiverse. We see everyone and everything who knows a Peter Parker trying to come through into that universe. And the multiverse has been explored in What If a little bit, I think in Loki as well. And so now it's in an MCU movie, which is cool because it's setting us up for the multiverse of madness. Okay, so now the ending where, I'm trying to get through this without crying, where Peter, as I view it, basically like willingly kind of like gives up his life to save the world. Huge growth in his character, and I think was a nice completion for the three-story character arc he's been through. So he started as like a little bit of like a naive kid, wants to be a hero, wants to be an Avenger, will do literally anything to be an Avenger, to growing up a little bit, just trying to live his life as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, to eventually that growth being completed as willingly making sacrifices to save the world, and in my opinion, choosing Spider-Man over Peter Parker. And I loved and hated that ending. I loved it because, the message was amazing for it. It completed the growth for that trilogy of that character. But I hated it for emotional reasons because, in my opinion, all the effort him and MJ have been through, him and Ned, him and the rest of the Avengers, gone. It's gone. He has to basically start over. And when he went to go tell MJ who he was in the past that they've shared together, and when he walked in, he overheard her and Ned talk about going to MIT, and then you see him put like the letter back in his pocket, you're like you know he's thinking, oh my god, they're better off without me, so I shouldn't tell. Like I was like, what? And a part of me like when I first watched it, I was like, so does that also mean that Ned's powers aren't going to be explored? But I have faith that they are, because I have faith that Peter Parker is going to find a way to tell MJ and Ned about their past together and explore the whole thing. So, but basically the movie ends shortly after that with Peter Parker moving into a new apartment. And another reason why I also love the ending is because Tom Holland's Peter Parker, in my personal opinion, is kind of now like the ultimate Spider-Man. Like I think moving forward, it's going to be a very comic book accurate Spider-Man. We see him at the end, he flies through a window. He has the comic version of the suit. Initially I thought he replicated Tobey's suit because the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans were, I think, also relatively comic book accurate. But, you know, Spider-Man in the comics, you know, has his own apartment, which Tom Holland's Peter Parker now does. He has rent due on the first of the month, so I'm going to assume he might start working for the Daily Bugle, which we have seen now is, you know, a thing in the MCU, as J. Jonah Jameson is newscasting through it. And I think, you know, Tom Holland's Peter Parker has lost collectively what Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield has lost. So Tobey and Andrews both lost Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben has not made an appearance in the MCU, but in Far From Home Peter Parker had a suitcase with BP on it, which I'm assuming stands for Ben Parker. His Aunt May died, and he as of right now, he lost MJ, like how Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker lost Gwen. So that's why I think this Spider-Man is going to become like the ultimate Spider-Man. And I think also is like Tom Holland's Peter Parker is going to become his own person. In the past, he's usually relied on Tony Stark or his friends. He's always tried to be that kid, and he's always tried to be just Peter Parker. Well, actually, I said earlier, he's trying to be Spider-Man and then Peter Parker, but now I think he knows who he wants to be. And unfortunately, he had to go through a lot. He had to lose Aunt May, lose basically everyone who ever knew him, because that's what he sacrificed, basically. But I think he kind of had to go through that to figure out, you know, who he was and what he's going to do and who he's going to be. But then it ends with that, and I have faith. I have faith he'll get MJ back and Ned back. I have a lot of faith. It also makes me sad because, like, I hope he tells some of the Avengers, like Doctor Strange and, you know, like other ones who he's met, because, like, he just feels so alone right now, and it hurts me personally. But we get our first end credit scene with Tom Hardy, who plays Venom. He is, I believe, at like a bar somewhere. If you haven't seen Venom Let There Be Carnage, quick spoiler, mute this if you don't want to hear it. But basically, because of Doctor Strange's spell, Tom Hardy gets thrust into the MCU. And then when the spell is set right, Tom Hardy gets sent back to the Sony universe, I guess. I was kind of mad about that because I was really excited to have Tom Hardy in the MCU. I kind of wanted to see Tom Hardy and eventually Tom Holland's Peter Parker, like, you know, in a movie or a TV show together. So kind of mad that they borrowed Tom Hardy, the MCU borrowed Tom Hardy's Venom for not 2 minutes, not even, and then kind of brought him back. But it was cool that a Venom symbiote, or maybe not a Venom, but a symbiote was left behind. So a version of Venom, or maybe even the other one's probably Venom though, is going to be in the MCU eventually. So it's clever how they did that. They they brought through the universes. I just wish, I was like, you only brought him for 2 seconds, what the heck? But it was clever, but I wish he stayed for a movie or something, you know. Quickly back to the last fight scene. Eventually they damaged the structural engineering, and so the shield actually falls from the Statue of Liberty, which, you know, I took it to mean that like it was kind of like restoring Lady Liberty, in my opinion, like taking the shield away. I think was this kind of symbolism how like Peter Parker idolized Tony Stark and kind of did like all the way through Far From Home, idolized the Avengers. So I think, that kind of like her Lady Liberty holding the shield kind of represented that. And then as it fell, I think that was when Peter Parker kind of realized that he had to rely on himself and his own abilities and have confidence in his abilities. So it was like something that was like, I'm not going to use the term like messed up, but kind of like muddled a little bit, is now clear. So hopefully I explained that well, but I think that's what the symbolism means. And I am kind of glad they took the shield off of the Statue of Liberty, because I don't think it should be on there. I think those two symbolisms should be separate, because one is like personal willpower, because it's like, like back in the day, like Lady Liberty represented like a beacon of hope for like the immigrants, but the immigrants came like from their own, they came on like by themselves without like help from a superpowered being or anything. Like it was their own drive. It was their own drive and their own like wish to prosper that brought them here. Whereas, you have Captain America, which, of course he kept America and the world safe. But I think there's a difference because, he's super powered basically. So I think, it's great to like, be fans and idolize people, but I think you should also still have your sense of like self and not relying on the super powerful people to solve your own problems, essentially. And then, so that's like, I guess like you could call like the Venom was like the mid-credit scene, but we don't have an end credit scene for like Spider-Man, which is like the second time that's kind of happened, because Endgame did not have an end credit scene. But what we do get is a quick teaser trailer for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We see Wanda, we see some of the events that have happened or look like what happened in What If. I believe we see Dark Doctor Strange, which I'm super excited to see them go at it in live action, because their battle in the animated version was honestly pretty epic. But guys, that was my review for Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home has officially been reeled in. And this will probably be uploaded tomorrow, Monday, December 20th, that morning, probably like around like 9 a.m. So if you're watching it, it is the 20th, maybe a little bit later if you catch it later. But on the 20th, my friend and I are going to go see it again, and we are going to do a Dyad Discusses, so catch that video probably Tuesday after the 21st, December 21st, and what we thought of No Way Home, and hopefully seeing it again will give us a new insight and new things to talk about, because I think this movie it kind of has to be seen again. It was like, I understand everything that happened, but I feel like I need to watch it again to really really absorb my own feelings about it, So be sure to subscribe to the channel to check that out in the future, and so you don't miss anything. But please leave a like, comment. What did you think about the movie? Is it your favorite movie? Is it the worst movie you've ever seen? And are you in between? Leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. And be sure to hit the notification bell so you know when I upload future Marvel review videos. But guys, that's all I've got for you today. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.